Or not, this morning I'm going to make a case for slavery. I hope y'all have a cup of coffee and you're ready to buckle in for that. We're going to have a whole lot of fun with it. All right. Good morning. All right. SA Fish and Golf has drew first blood again. Uncle Steve's with us. I see Pitt, Danny, and here to lurk, man. Oh, I still need to get a note from you here to lurk. I promised you a t-shirt. Just let me know which one you're looking for. And I'll get that out to you. Also, here to lurk, you are more active on Twitter than a lot of our other old viewers. I'm looking at you, Steve. Uncle Steve, you need to get you a Twitter account and get on there. You would have a ball. Anyway, so here to lurk, I know you look at Twitter more than the rest of them. I dropped a reply to Nikki Haley saying 12 fellas down, 1 to go. You need to go check those out and share the shit out of those. I put a little work into that one. So Waller asks, we're on Twitter. Hell yeah, we're on X, smartass. But yes, the Brushfire Mind is in fact blue check marked on X. We are verified, legit. We are on the X's, and thanks guys for that. Actually, because part of that came partly from damn Waller. that was funded by the Buy Me a Coffee campaign. Oh yeah, here to lurk. So here to lurk says, "Look here, Squid." Yeah, I dropped another pretty scathing Twitter reply this morning. There's some guy that I forget his name now, Bad Brad or something, posted this video ranting about your service don't mean shit. All you veterans who are going to vote for Donald Trump. I served in the Navy. I retired 18 years, and your service don't mean shit. You traitors. And I replied to him, "Look here, Squid. You're a glorified soggy Uber driver, you piece of shit. You gave real men a ride to work so we could go do some actual war fighting. Don't tell me my service don't mean shit when you're voting for hostile foreign invasion, infanticide, and the collapse of the American way of life. We swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Biden has clearly stated in public addresses that he intends to violate it and let the court catch up. Obama literally said, I hate the Constitution because it ties the hands of government and prevents us from doing what we want to do. To which most of us said, yo, Barry, that's the point. You might know that if you were, I don't know, natural born citizen, shitburger. Anyway, so all that aside, what you're really here for this morning is I am going to give you some history, some context to actually support a Democrat position vis-a-vis slavery. So let's start with what got me going on this story to begin with this morning. We've got this interview, and first I need to apologize about a little bit of inaccuracy in the thumbnail. There are two different couples that are at issue in this story. The Stokes and this woman Leslie, I think her name is. The image in the thumbnail is the Stokes, and Leslie, the other wokey lefty woman, is the one that said it's like I have a personal chef for free. So I will apologize to Jessica Stokes for that editorial error there. But it doesn't change the nature of what they're doing. So apparently, Massachusetts is running a program to house some of these hostile foreign invaders. And we have this story from the Stokes couple who say that within an hour of applying to be included in the program, a migrant family was dropped off at their house.
Owen and Jessica Stokes called the state to sign up to be a host family. It took less than an hour for the displaced migrants to be dropped off at their door.
I gotta get sheets on the bed. How many people are coming? Where are they from? What ages? We really knew nothing.
The need is so clearly overwhelming.
The family of four who didn't want to go on camera had been sleeping at Logan Airport.
The hostile foreign invaders didn't want to have their faces shown on camera. I'm shocked.
Parents and two kids journeyed from Chile to Texas, then Massachusetts, and there are so many stories like it.
It's boggled.
And they're referred to as refugees, but the guy just said it there. They came from Chile. Y'all, there's a bunch of damn countries between the U.S. and Chile, right? Rule number one when you're talking about refugees, if there's more than a border between your host nation, which poses the threat from which you need refuge, and the nation to which you flee, begging for protection, you have not fled persecution. You have pursued an economic opportunity. Never forget, there are two kinds of people who are flooding across the southern border right now. There are two kinds of hostile foreign invaders. There are economic migrants seeking to take advantage of the wealth and productivity and prosperity of the United States of America. And there are actual enemies, hostile host nation operatives who are here to infiltrate and conduct wartime operations against our sovereign nation. Neither of those are refugees under the strict legal definition of what a refugee is. To be a refugee, you must be fleeing from legitimate danger to the nearest available safe nation. You cannot legally, and we're talking U.S. law and international legal standard. If you have crossed more than one border, you are not a refugee. This is a matter of definition, right? And here at Alert says, and the percentage of hostiles is higher than any of us expect. Yeah. Yeah. So, what we're looking at, and let me play the other clip before I get into the history lesson. So, here's the one that just, oh my God.
And it's really fun having them. What I realized is there's so much prejudice against refugees, mostly because people don't know them.
Lisa says she feels like she has her own personal chef, as Wildande loves cooking.
And it's really
I have my own personal chef because Wadande loves Wadande. So the woman with the personal chef, the chef is Haitian. Let you in on a little secret about people, Haitians. They're also a non-contigentist foreign nation, not refugees. And by the way, Haiti is in the state that it's in explicitly and directly as the result of the interference of the Clinton Foundation, right? The Clinton Foundation made a fortune by screwing those people. So you got problems in Haiti that you want solutions for. You need to file suit against the fucking Clintons. That ain't complicated. So let's talk about the history of slavery. I could go on a pretty good diatribe about how the Civil War wasn't actually fought over slavery. It was states' rights. Slavery was just one of the inciting incidents. We can go down that road and make that case. And there's some truth in that, and it's worth mentioning, because while it was the South that seceded, it was the Democrats in the South that seceded, and it was rhino Republicans like Abraham Lincoln that made a big virtue signal show of freeing the slaves. But never forget, the Emancipation Proclamation freed exactly 0 slaves, because what it did is it said that those slaves held in bondage in those states which have seceded, which is to say, those states over which the authority of the government issuing the proclamation refuse to acknowledge the legitimacy of that authority and therefore will not comply with the order. Only in those states where compliance with the authority of the order is a guaranteed non sequitur, only in those states are the slaves declared to have been freed. Those slaves held in bondage in the states which had not seceded from the Union were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation within the context of the proclamation itself. And because the South did not recognize his authority to do so, none of their slaves were freed by the proclamation either. It was one of the biggest examples of pure virtue signaling in history. Now, you can make the case that the Civil War was only and exclusively about slavery, and okay, I accept you're not too bright, but let's accept your premise for a moment for the sake of argument. You are talking about the Democrat Party that fought to keep slaves then. You're talking about the same party that instituted Jim Crow. You're talking about the same party that opposed both civil rights acts almost unanimously. Right, that's who you're talking about. Just to be very clear, the Democrat Party has always been pro-slavery. You're also talking about the party that produced Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood. That party today is still pro-abortion, pro-eugenics. And they still message toward building their eugenics clinics in so-called underserved communities, right? The mission of Planned Parenthood is still today, and I quote Margaret Sanger, to exterminate the Negro. That's what they're there for. So now let's back up and I'll make the case for slavery. The Atlantic slave trade, the African slave trade that most American public school educated people think of as the model of slavery, is actually a relatively novel concept. Slavery as a practice among humans has been a part of human culture and is still today. There are more slaves on Earth today, not just by raw number, but as a percentage of total global population, than at any point in history. Now, because of the nature of the left and the nature of their particular moral corruption, the vast majority of those slaves happen to be child sex slaves and not like field labor slavery, although that's going on as well. Right, I can point to several countries in Africa and, of course, the Uyghur concentration camps in China. That kind of slavery is also going on. But let's talk about what slavery was before that. The very beginning of slavery, to all the progressives out there, I want you to understand this is important. Slavery began as a very progressive new idea. It was the mechanism by which tribal forces in war conflict were able to morally justify not completely exterminating every living man, woman, and child of the opposing tribe. It was a moral evolution, an improvement in the dealing of humans with one another. It was the transition from, we disagree over who owns this patch of land, and so on one side of this patch of land, everybody dies. We'll compromise. We won. Most of you are dead. The rest of you can survive and work the field. You'll be fed. You'll be housed. But you will work forever. Part of that tradition of slavery, though, did not include the sale of slaves. It was, those people were a low class. They were a particular rung on the hierarchy. They were not individual property. That's not how that worked. Fast forward to the Roman Empire and to the Greeks. They did it a little differently. If you were a wealthy landowner, a citizen, you had a large piece of land. And part of the facility of your large acreage was agriculture, was animal husbandry, livestock, right? Essentially, you ran a farm. But you yourself, the landowner, was not a farmer by profession. You were an artisan or a politician. You were a senator. You were something like that. You were a citizen professional. Or you were just a rich dickhead who had a bunch of land. And the way slavery worked then is, on your land, you would have farms, you would have fields, and you would build servants' quarters. And the people who were slaves then, and I say slaves because the word didn't exist yet, the concept of the ownership, you were a slave on the estate. But the word slave didn't come into play until the Muslims started taking slaves, and it was a bastardization of the word Slav, because the Slavs, the Slovakians, the Slavs were among the first white slaves taken by invading hordes from their southern borders. Let that one sink in for a moment. Anyway. So basically, in the context of the Greco and Roman empires, slavery was essentially the welfare program. If you were too poor, that's what you did. It's similar to how the feudalistic societies worked. You have the lord, he has all the lands, right? And when we're talking about the lord, right, or the citizen that is a landowner, we're not talking about like Sergeant Major's 23-acre farm. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres of land over which this person has ownership, right? That's why royal titles work the way they work. So, under that context of slavery, the only way a slave moved from one plantation to another was voluntarily, and usually that was done with the endorsement of the landowner, right? I'm a senator, my buddy's a senator, we're good buddies, and I want to do my good buddy senator a favor, and I have a slave who lives on my property whom I have a very good relationship with, and I'm very impressed with the way that he works. I'm going to do the slave a courtesy. I'm giving him a promotion, sending him to my friend who's an even wealthier senator who has better accommodations for his slaves. And I'm doing my friend a favor as well by sending him a really good slave who's going to work for him. I'm doing them both a favor. That's the closest the Romans and the Greeks got to the actual exchange or sale. Chattel slavery, where you actually own the person in the legal sense and can buy and sell and trade slaves like property, that was a concept that originated exclusively from Africa. That's how African tribes did business, right? And the way they teach it in public schools is they want you to believe that basically the English went down to Africa and just started kidnapping people in the woods, right? You get this image of, men in shorts and pith helmets running around the woods with butterfly nets and snatching Negroes out of trees and dragging them off against their will. That's not how that worked. Those people were slaves through a system not dissimilar to the one I initially described, where two tribes come in conflict and the survivors become slaves to the victors, right? That's how that worked. And then they got in the business of selling the slaves. Chattel slavery of the sort was novel. Now, it happens to be that the new slavery that's going on, if you guys have not seen Sound of Freedom yet, I encourage you to watch it. If you can go to the Angel Studios website and watch it for free. I believe it's running on Amazon now as well, on Prime. I caution you, before you sit down to watch that movie, you might want to pour yourself a drink and have a box of tissues nearby, because within the first 10 minutes, it will wrench your heart out when you realize, oh my God, this is how it's done. But the modern slavery is very much about kidnapping people, especially children. And what happens, and it has been happening for some time, is they kidnap the child. The child is then prostituted until basically they're used up. And then they're forced, if not just disposed of, killed and thrown away, then they end up working in a labor slave job. So, now, this might sound like hyperbole compared to the conversation that should be surrounding this.
Having them. What I realized is there's so much prejudice against refugees, mostly because people don't know them.
Lisa says she feels like she has her own personal chef, as Wildande loves cooking.
And it's
They love to call us Nazis. Let me remind you, Hitler did not one day just come up and say, hey, I got an idea. Let's kill all the Jews. It didn't happen that way. We know it didn't happen that way, in part, because they wrote everything down and we know exactly how it happened, but in part at least because we know that you can't get that many people to just go, yeah, fuck them, let's kill everybody. People don't do that shit. Instead, they started with, hey, the factories are dirty. Let's use this cool new pesticide to get rid of all the bugs. We'll get rid of all the lice and everything, and we'll get rid of all the disease that comes with that. We'll clean it up because they're filthy. And then the next step was, hey, we've got too many people in our prisons. Let's execute. These people aren't valuable, right? We've got people in here that can't be redeemed. They're violent, dangerous criminals. Let's execute them. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and execute the rest of the criminals too. And hey, look at these other guys. Right? They're not in jail yet, but they're all crooked and dealing with our money and stuff. Maybe they should be in jail. And if they should be in jail, maybe we just cut out the middleman and throw them in the shower. That's how you get there. Right? You go from safe, legal, and rare to abortion on demand funded by the state even after birth. That's how you get there. You go from, you know what, I'd be happy to take a few migrants into my home and help with their terrible plight, to, yo, hey, I should be able to take my 55 slaves that are picking cotton in my field to the polls on Tuesday. You go from no person is illegal, they're refugees, they're migrants, to why can't my slaves vote? And for everybody who has bought into this psychotic notion that the slippery slope argument somehow presents as a tacit fallacy, oh, thank you, Here to Lurk. You just brought it home for me, right? The slippery slope argument is a fallacy. It's a fallacy. It's a tacit fallacy. No. The slippery slope argument is not a fallacy. It is an inevitability, right? We've had a couple of mass shootings recently, right? And they've all had something in common. They've all had transition in common, right? And you immediately get people calling for gun control. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Idris Elba was doing an interview recently, right? British guy doing a conversation with some British podcasters. And what were they talking about? What were they discussing? They were discussing the need for the government in the UK to begin not only banning knives, but searching citizens, just stopping people on the street and searching them and confiscating their knives. And they even have a boogeyman like the AR-15. They talk about what they call the zombie knives, which, guys, I shit you not, we're not even talking about like a machete that you can actually do some trailblazing with. We're talking about barely a Rambo knife that just happens to be marketed with the zombie apocalypse logoing on it. And so they're talking about these zombie knives like they're the next AR-15, right? Nobody's got guns in England, and people are getting stabbed so often that it's a problem big enough that you're going to discuss taking the knives away. Maybe the point you should be looking at is people like to kill each other. It's kind of what we've been doing for ever. Right, I don't have to extrapolate this from data or historical anecdotes, right? I'm here to tell you, killing bad guys is fun. I've seen me do it. Right? War. You've all heard the quote, right? War is a horrible thing, but it's not the worst of things, right? And I'm here to tell you that while there's a lot of corruption and military-industrial complex and the churning of money and profit, you're right. There's a lot of reasons that people want war. Tell you from experience, war is fun. It's scary how fun it is. War, and I wish everybody would take this message to heart. War, in many ways, is like coffee, or cigarettes, or sex, or sugary candy. Right? It's like all of those things in this way. You shouldn't ever try it because you won't ever want to stop. And that should really be something that people learn to take to heart. I'm telling you, it's one of those threshold things. It's one of those threshold things, right? An adult cannot explain to a child what it means to be an adult. A person cannot understand the difference between being a child and being an adult until they cross that threshold, until they have become an adult and experienced both sides of that threshold. It's like being a parent. It's like so many other things like that. There's that threshold that until you have had both experiences, you cannot tell somebody what the other side of that experience is like. War is the same way. And I'm telling you, most of you don't want to know the difference. You don't want to know what's on the other side of that line. Because many of you will be terrified by what it means for who you are. Sergeant Major says, think of all the soldiers who spent the last 20 years figuring out how to get deployed again. Yeah. Right? I got a wife and 4 kids. And that's a big part of the reason that I did not deploy again. That's pretty much the only reason that I didn't keep going back. If I hadn't gotten married and started having babies and have a wife that made me promise to stop getting shot at, I would be somewhere shooting people right now. But I made a promise, and I'm sticking to it, hard as that may be. So, this is where they get you. Baby steps. The intentional slippery slope. Just like we went from what 2 consenting adults do in the privacy of their own bedroom is nobody's business. We went from that to date me, you bigot, to acts of sodomy in parades in the street, to basically entire social media platforms being dedicated to the social contagion of transgenderism. Diamond Dave says war is like a 21-year-old McCollin. Dave. Oh, you broke my chain. You broke my chain of thought. Fuck you, Dave. I'm ignoring you for a minute. I'm going to come back to you. Right. So it's just like we going from safe, legal, and rare to all the way up to birth to freely available, state-funded, up to and including post-birth abortions. It's one step at a time. We need an assault rifle ban to we're confiscating your Swiss Army knife on the street. It's one step at a time. And now that step is no person is illegal to I demand my 50 slaves be given the vote in the general election. Laugh at me now. We'll see where we are in 4 years. In fairness, the my 50 slaves should be allowed to vote. That's probably 20 years away without intervention, but that's the objective. That's the plan. Now, I'll close on this. Dave says war is like a 21-year-old McCollin. Dave, for Cameron's birthday, I went to get him a bottle of scotch, and I had decided that, you know what, Cameron had been through a little bit of a rough patch at the time, and I wanted to help him. I wanted to, do something nice for him, kind of lift the spirits, a little something. And I went to get a bottle of one of my favorite scotches for my boy. Now, I am accustomed to paying about between $200 and $250 for a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan. And I've had the 21. And Dave, so Dave, there is a 50-year-old Macallan out there. And it's in the several thousands of dollars a glass. But COVID did this to us. Day drinking line moms in masks. They drank up all the scotch. And now my 18-year-old Macallan is $500. Let's go, Brandon. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. I love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Real quick, Waller made a comment. If legal chattel slavery was allowed today, I'm sorry I missed this. I can't believe I missed this. If legal chattel slavery was allowed today, it would cost more than paid labor. See, one of the things that you have to remember is when slavery was still legal in the U.S., it cost more than paid labor. It always did. Right? So when you have slaves, you put up a barracks, you put up some housing, right? You feed them. You own the property. Good to go. When you have paid labor, in order to attract the labor to be paid, you have to pay enough for that person to finance their home, their board, their room and board. They have to be able to get a place to live on their money. They have to be able to eat. If something happens to them, if they get injured, they either die or they pay for the medical care, right, et cetera, et cetera. You pay them. But that doesn't mean that you have to pay them to make them wealthy. But when you've got slaves, right, the black slaves were treated better than the Irish indentured servants because the indentured servants were cheap. They were dirt cheap. They'd sign that contract for just enough money to get over here on the boat and work it off, right? But your slaves, that was expensive farm equipment. You had to keep those in good order because they were a valuable investment. The only thing you were going to get out of the indentured servant was they were either going to pay off the debt or work themselves to death, and more likely they were going to work themselves to death before they ever paid off the debt. The slaves were expensive, right? But by the time the Civil War happened, that was changing. That was changing because the slavery was phasing out, and you didn't use slaves in industrialized plants. So the industrialized plants were having to offer enough to get the paid labor in, and it got increasingly more expensive as that went on, and you had to compete with other industrial services. So the exact thing that you're talking about is it being costing more than paid labor. That was happening. That was in progress when the Civil War happened. Slavery was on its way out as a mechanism because of the cost of slavery. So we kind of missed the boat on that one. All right, I'm gonna close it out now.